So guys, what's going on? I hope you guys are well. Guys, I've just had a video sent to me. A video where Leonard Ellerbe was saying that Terence Crawford is the number one pound for pound fighter over Canelo. He goes, Canelo's a very good fighter, but Crawford is the number one pound for pound, not Canelo Alvarez. He said that Canelo's obviously done great, but look at the guys that he's been fighting of late. And I think that tells you all you need to know. I can't believe that Leonard Ellerbe would say that. Firstly, normally these guys are they praise Canelo a lot. They give him a lot of, praise because he's one of the guys that Floyd fought and beat. And it makes Floyd's career look a lot better because now that Canelo's doing so well. But I have seen Leonard Ellerbe say that Crawford's the number one pound for pound, which I totally disagree with. And I find it funny how Leonard Ellerbe criticizes Canelo's resume, but then doesn't say anything about Crawford's resume. Now, I personally think it's got to do with the fact that Canelo's with DAZN and he's with Eddie Hearn. And obviously, Leonard Ellerbe probably sees Eddie Hearn as a direct rival, right? And they see Eddie Hearn, who's working with Canelo now. And it was the same, I think, when he was with Oscar, because I don't think they had great relationship from what I know, and them going back and forth with each other on social media. So I feel like they're saying that because they don't have the greatest of relationships with the Canelo's team. But I don't know how you could say that Canelo Alvarez's resume and the guys that he's been fighting of late are not great. He's fought champions. Billy Joe Saunders was a champion, undefeated champion. Callum Smith was an undefeated champion. The only real gimme opponents that he's had were Rocky Fielding, Yildirim. That's it. Everybody else he's faced with either a former world champion or a world champion at that particular point. How can you say that they were how can you say that they weren't hard fights or they weren't credible fights? How can you say Billy Joe Saunders, the undefeated world champion, is not a hard fight? Now, Canelo made it look easy. That doesn't mean it's not hard, and that doesn't mean Billy Joe Saunders isn't credible. Billy Joe Saunders is very credible. Very credible, 100%. He was an undefeated world champion, and Canelo made it look easy. I don't even think he got it out of first gear. Callum Smith, again, he's a former world champion now, but at the time when Canelo fought him, undefeated world champion, the recognized number one in the 168-pound division, and he beat him without getting out first gear. I don't know how anyone can criticize Canelo's resume. It just staggers me. I think Canelo's resume is the best in boxing right now. And I do agree with Ellerbe about Crawford's skills, that Crawford's got unbelievable skills, but so has Canelo. Canelo's got unbelievable skills. Canelo's, what a fighter. His skills are off the chart. And not just that, then you look at his skills and then you look at his resume. It's hard to make an argument for anybody else. It's not even close. There's not even there's a close second. It's like Canelo's number one and then the rest are playing catch up. They're miles behind. Even Tim Bradley, who's Terence Crawford's close friend, right, says that Canelo's number one pound for pound. He's Crawford's best mate, like very close mate. And he's saying that Canelo's number one pound for pound. You can't tell me that Canelo just beating Billy Joe and Callum Smith comfortably, who were undefeated world champions, that isn't putting him number one. And Crawford, who hasn't fought a current champion or a guy that was a champion when he faced him in such a long time, it's crazy. When was the last time Terence Crawford fought a world champion? Against Jeff Horn. Now, how many fights ago was that? 4 or 5? Like, because after Jeff Horn, who did he fight? After Jeff Horn, did he fight Benavidez? Then he fought Amir Khan. Then he fought Kavalauskas. And then he's fought Kell Brook. So the last 4 fights he's had, they weren't against current world champions. Yeah, some of them, like Brook and Khan, were former world champions, but they weren't current world champions. Whereas Canelo Alvarez is fighting the best in his division. He's fighting the champions in his division. He's fighting the champions. Think about it. Canelo Alvarez fought Billy Joe, undefeated world champion, right? And he fought Callum Smith, who was the recognized #1 at 168 pounds and undefeated. And Canelo just made it look easy. I just don't know how anyone can look at Crawford's resume and then compare it to Canelo and then say Crawford's the #1 pound for pound, and even criticize Canelo's resume of late when he's been fighting undefeated champions. And then when you look at Crawford's last 4 fights, he's fought guys that, now I'm a massive fan of Amir Khan. Everybody knows that, but he wasn't a current world champion and he was well past his best. Well past his best when Crawford fought him. Even Kell Brook, who was a former world champion, but his best days were way behind him. Those are probably the biggest names on Crawford's resume in terms of name-wise. And the best win on Crawford's resume when he fought probably Postal, who was an undefeated, active world champion. An active world champion at the time he fought him. And Crawford, that was a good win because Crawford made it look easy. And actually, Gamboa was a really good win as well. I got to give him that. Gamboa was a really, really good win at 135 pounds because a lot of people thought Gamboa would beat Crawford. And Gamboa was rated very highly on the pound-for-pound ratings when Crawford fought him. He was Olympic gold medalist, and he was very, very highly rated. And people thought that Gamboa was going to be a superstar in the sport. He didn't quite reach what people thought or fulfill his potential because, Olympic gold medalist, we expected a lot more from Gamboa. And Crawford, he beat him well. Gamboa wobbled Crawford, but Crawford came back and stopped him. Crawford, good fighter, don't get me wrong, but he lacks that resume, man. Now, if Crawford beats Spence, or beats the winner of Spence Pacquiao, now we're talking. Now Crawford has a claim. He's undefeated and he's just beaten a pound-for-pound top 5. And if Pacquiao beats Spence, he'll be a pound-for-pound top 5. And if he was to beat one of those guys, then he has claim for #1 for sure. He's an undefeated 3-division world champion, right? He would have, if he becomes undisputed at 147, then I don't think there's any dispute that Crawford is the #1 pound for pound because he'd be undisputed at 2 weights. That I don't think anyone's done that. He'd be undisputed at 2 weight classes. And Canelo's a 4-division world champion, but he'd only be undisputed at 168. And let's be honest, the 168 division isn't that strong. So if Crawford was to unify the 147-pound division, which is far stronger than the division that Canelo's going to become undisputed in, then you have to make a case for Crawford being #1. And then I personally think if he beats the winner of Spence Pacquiao, which is going to be for 3 belts, he'll be fighting for the undisputed. If he wins that fight and becomes an undisputed welterweight champion, then you have to say Crawford leaps to #1 for sure. But as of right now, you can't make a case for Crawford. Right now, you cannot make a case for Crawford being ahead of Canelo on the pound for pound or being the best fighter in the world, or however you want to terminology, whether it's pound for pound. A lot of people don't believe in pound for pound, but it's hard to make a case for anybody else being the best fighter in the world right now over Canelo, with how dominant Canelo's looked against undefeated world champions. Let's not forget, Canelo's not just fighting any old scrubs. He's fighting undefeated world champions. Billy Joe was an undefeated world champion. Callum Smith was an undefeated world champion. You had Golovkin there, Jacobs there, Cotto there, Mosley, Khan, Lara. I know he lost to Mayweather, but had Mayweather, all these fights that he's had, Kirkland, Jacobs, Kovalev, look at that resume, all stellar names. All stellar names, all names that were former world champions that have a name in the sport, that are quality fighters. Now, people are going to say, well, oh, Kovalev was past his best and he fought Cotto past his best. The fact of the matter is, you're never going to get anybody, you're never going to always get a fighter always in his prime. It's never going to happen. It's very difficult to get two guys in their prime to fight one. It's not always going to happen. It's not his fault that he's fought who the guys that were out there at the time. And if they weren't slightly past their best, Cotto wasn't past his best. Cotto put in a great performance against Canelo. He wasn't past his best. Cotto was, I think he was still very, very good. He was still a quality fighter at the point Canelo fought him. And his performance against Canelo clearly shows that. So for me, Canelo's resume is unrivaled right now by anyone. I think he's got the best resume in boxing. He's got the best resume in boxing. I don't think anyone can make a case for anybody. I know Floyd Mayweather has said Crawford over Canelo, and I think Leonard Ellerbe basically just said exactly the same. So basically, because Floyd said it, he's got to say Crawford's number one. No, come on. How can you criticize, like, when he criticized Canelo's resume, I just knew straight away that obviously he's just being biased there, because you can't criticize Canelo's resume and then look at Crawford's resume and not say that, well, look who's Canelo's fighting, but then look at Crawford's resume and not say anything, because Crawford's resume is a lot worse. Is a lot worse than, like, it's not even close, because Canelo fought active, undefeated world champions. Crawford fought guys that were, like, the names that he fought were past their best, and the other guys that he fought are not even in the top 7 or 8 welterweights out there. So, you make that of what you want, but there's no way anyone that's neutral is going to say that Crawford's got a better resume or Crawford's the best pound-for-pound fighter or ahead of Canelo right now in terms of what he's achieved, in terms of the resume. Because it's not just about being undisputed. It's not just about, what achievements you have. It's about who you're fighting. It's about how you're beating them, right? Canelo Alvarez is fighting undefeated world champions and making them look and beating them. Who's doing it like Canelo right now? Canelo fought in December. He never even held a version of the 168-pound title. He beat Callum Smith, right? He beat Yildirim in February. Then he fought Billy Joe in May and beat him. He's now a unified champion where he holds 3 belts. Because obviously when he fought Callum Smith, that was for 2 belts. That WBC was a vacant title that they put on the line. So Canelo had fought for the WBC and WBA. He won 2 belts against Callum Smith and the Ring Magazine, I believe, right? Then he fought Billy Joe for the WBO, won the WBO, and now he's going to look to fight Caleb Plant for the IBF. So I don't know how anyone can look at Canelo's resume and say, you know what, his resume is not stellar. And say that Crawford should be ahead of him, because Crawford's got great skills and a great fighter, without question. Without question, Terence Crawford is one of the best fighters and one of the best skilled fighters. And maybe he's even more versatile than Canelo, being a switch hitter. But the fact of the matter is that his level of competition doesn't compare to Canelo's level of competition. It just doesn't. Canelo's resume is on another level. And when you fight the better competition, like, where if Crawford was to fight Spence, he's going to look more vulnerable, because Spence is an elite pound-for-pound guy, a quality big welterweight. Crawford, we're going to see more weaknesses in Crawford. We're going to see more weaknesses, whereas Crawford's been fighting competition, which he's a massive favorite in the fight. He's a massive favorite. So he hasn't really got anything to gain. He can only look bad in the fight. Because if he knocks a guy out in 1 or 2 rounds, people will say, oh, he beat a nobody. And then if he looks bad and then people will be like, oh, Crawford's been exposed. So to be honest with you, Crawford is fighting guys right now where he's not going to get a lot of credit. He needs the top welterweights like your Thurmans, like your Garcias, like your Spence or Pacquiao. And if he was to beat one of them, then I think he'd get a lot more credit. So I do hope that Crawford can get the winner of Spence and Pacquiao, because that would be for the undisputed welterweight championship of the world. And I think that's all we want. That's all we want. We want to see the best fight the best. and we want to see Terence Crawford fight Errol Spence or Manny Pacquiao, whoever that is. Whoever wins that fight, we want to see Terence Crawford get a shot. But in terms of pound for pound, there's no way Canelo Alvarez is not ahead of Crawford right now. Right now, Canelo's the number one pound for pound for me. But leave your thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comment section below, guys. And guys, remember to please like, share, subscribe to my channel. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.